Welcome to Stoic Wisdom. Today we are diving into a subject that is rarely spoken of, yet it silently shapes countless lives and marriages. The brutal truth is this: many married women become the easiest prey, not because they are weak, not because they lack morals, but because human nature itself is wired for temptation. Most people don't wake up one morning and decide, "Today, I'll betray everything I've built." That isn't how it happens. The downfall begins in whispers, in shadows, in moments so small they almost escape notice. It begins with a harmless conversation, a lingering glance, a heart that beats a little faster at the buzz of a phone when the message isn't from her husband. Psychologists call it the erosion of boundaries. One small compromise at a time, one secret thought at a time. And before she realizes it, the woman staring back from the mirror is no longer the woman she once was. But here's the deeper question: why are so many married women vulnerable to this slow unraveling? And more importantly, how do they justify it to themselves? Today, we're not here to judge. We are here to uncover, to expose the patterns, to understand the psychology, and to see how Stoic wisdom, paired with modern insight, can reveal the unseen dangers that lie beneath the surface of ordinary lives. Let's begin. 1. The unspoken void. Why some married women seek external attention. Marriage, at its best, is supposed to be a fortress, a partnership built on trust, loyalty, and shared dreams. As Helen Mirren once said, "A great marriage is not when the perfect couple comes together. It is when an imperfect couple learns to enjoy their differences." But the harsh reality is this: not all marriages remain strong. Even when a husband and wife stand at the altar, looking each other in the eye and promising forever, time, routine, and human nature often chip away at those vows. So why do some married women, who once stood firm in their devotion, later find themselves drawn toward the attention of another man? It is not always about lust. It is not always about betrayal in the obvious sense. More often, it begins in a quieter, subtler way: the search for what was lost along the way. Emotional hunger versus physical attraction. Most men make the mistake of assuming that women cheat or wander only because of physical attraction. They imagine some stranger with charm, money, or looks pulling her away. But psychologists tell us this isn't usually the case. For women, the temptation often lies not in the body, but in the heart. A woman is more vulnerable when she feels unseen, unheard, or unnoticed in her marriage. In the early days of love, everything feels alive. There are late-night conversations filled with dreams. There are touches that feel electric. There are stolen glances that remind her she is deeply desired. But over time, routine sets in. The excitement of discovery is replaced by the monotony of responsibility. Conversations that were once about passion and dreams now revolve around bills, schedules, and household chores. The glances that once burned with desire are replaced with tired nods across the dinner table. The thrilling unpredictability of love fades into a predictable routine, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, she begins to feel invisible. The silent killer: indifference. Dr. John Gottman, a world-renowned relationship psychologist, studied thousands of marriages. His conclusion was striking. The true killer of love is not conflict, but indifference. Couples can survive arguments. They can weather storms. But when one partner stops noticing the other, when a woman feels invisible in her own home, her soul begins to starve. This starvation is not always conscious. Sometimes all it takes is one small gesture from the outside world. A compliment from a stranger, a conversation where she feels interesting again. A moment where someone listens without distraction. Suddenly, that tiny spark feels like oxygen after years of suffocation. The irony, she may not even be looking for it. But when it arrives, it awakens something inside her that had been sleeping for years. The Coolidge effect and the thrill of novelty. In psychology, there is something called the Coolidge effect. It refers to the way both men and women are wired for novelty. New experiences trigger fresh dopamine, the brain chemical responsible for desire and excitement. When marriage becomes routine, when every day looks the same, novelty disappears. And without novelty, desire struggles to survive. This doesn't mean she doesn't love her husband. It doesn't mean she wants to leave her marriage. It simply means that the thrill of being wanted, pursued, and desired again can feel intoxicating. F. Scott Fitzgerald once wrote, "We are most alive when we are in love." But the truth is, love is not simply about being together. It's about being chosen again and again. When a married woman feels pursued by another man, even subtly, it reminds her of who she used to be: confident, radiant, alive. She remembers the younger version of herself, the one who felt effortlessly attractive and magnetic. And so, even if she has no intention of crossing any boundaries, she may find herself walking dangerously close to the edge, because for a fleeting moment, she feels alive again. Identity loss. After marriage. Another overlooked factor is what psychologists call social identity loss. Before marriage, she was her own person. She had dreams, ambitions, interests, passions. She was herself. After marriage, her identity often shifts. She becomes someone's wife. Later, perhaps, she becomes someone's mother. She becomes the caretaker, the supporter, the glue that holds everything together. These roles are not bad. In fact, they can be beautiful. But when her entire sense of self becomes wrapped up in what she is to others rather than who she is in herself, she begins to feel invisible, even to her own soul. In those moments, external attention feels less like temptation and more like relief. It becomes a reminder that she is still someone, an individual with charm, worth, and identity outside of her marriage. 2. The justification game. How the mind excuses what the heart has already decided. No one wakes up one morning and says, "I think I'll betray my marriage today." That is not how it happens. Betrayal is never born in a single dramatic moment. It is born in a series of quiet rationalizations. A thought here, a justification there, a whispered excuse that soothes the conscience while the heart marches forward toward temptation. The psychology of self-deception. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. It is the mental discomfort that arises when our actions conflict with our values. A married woman knows that she vowed faithfulness. She knows in her mind that crossing boundaries with another man would break not only her promise, but her sense of integrity. Yet, when her emotions are drawn toward the thrill of external attention, her heart begins tugging in a different direction. So what happens? The mind steps in to rewrite the story. It manufactures justifications, little excuses that make the unacceptable feel acceptable. It's just talking. I'm not doing anything wrong. If my husband really loved me, I wouldn't need this. Other women do much worse. I deserve at least this small happiness. It doesn't count as cheating if it's only emotional. Notice the pattern. Every excuse lowers the barrier just slightly. Every rationalization creates a little more space between action and guilt. And just like erosion wears down the strongest cliffs, these tiny justifications wear down the strongest vows. Stoic insight. the first thought versus the chosen action. The Stoics warned us about this long before modern psychology. Epictetus wrote, "It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The danger lies not in the first spark of temptation, but in how we interpret it. A glance, a smile, a compliment. These things are not evil in themselves. They become dangerous when the mind chooses to dwell on them, to reinterpret them, to build stories around them. A woman may tell herself, "It's nothing, he's just being kind." Yet secretly, she may nurture the memory of his compliment for days, replaying it in her mind. She may dress more carefully the next time she knows she will see him. She may begin to crave the small moments of attention, each time telling herself, "I've done nothing wrong." The Stoics would say, the first impression is not your fault, but what you choose to do with it. That is where virtue or vice begins. The slippery slope of boundaries. At first, the boundary remains intact. She would never dream of physically betraying her husband. But boundaries rarely fall all at once. They collapse one compromise at a time. A woman allows herself to linger in a conversation that stirs her heart. She permits herself to smile back, a little too long. She accepts the idea that texting late at night is harmless. She convinces herself that her secret friendship is not really betrayal. But with each compromise, the line between right and wrong blurs. What was once unthinkable now seems merely questionable. What was once forbidden now feels like not that bad. And by the time she reaches the edge of the cliff, she no longer sees it as a fall. She sees it as a natural step forward. A story of subtle justification. Consider Anna, a woman married for 12 years. Her husband, Mark, is a good man. He works long hours, provides for the family, and loves her in his own quiet way. But Anna feels unseen. Her days are filled with chores, schedules, and obligations. One afternoon at work, a colleague named David compliments her presentation. He doesn't just say, "Good job." He looks into her eyes and says, "You have a gift for this. You make people listen." Anna feels something awaken in her. That evening, as she washes dishes, she recalls his words. She smiles to herself. She tells herself, "It's just a compliment." The next week, she looks forward to seeing David. When he asks how her weekend was, she lights up. He listens with genuine interest, something she feels Mark no longer does. Soon, Anna finds herself dressing with more care on days she knows David will be there. She tells herself, "It's innocent. Everyone likes to feel attractive." Weeks turn into months. Anna and David begin sharing jokes over text. The conversations become personal, then intimate. Anna feels alive again, yet every step is justified. "We're just friends. My husband doesn't give me this attention. I deserve to feel good about myself." By the time Anna realizes she has crossed an emotional boundary, the justifications are so ingrained that she no longer feels guilty. She feels entitled. How justification feeds the cycle. This is the heart of the justification game. Once the mind has decided to excuse one small step, it becomes easier to excuse the next. Each rationalization builds a story, and eventually, the story becomes more real to her than the marriage itself. She tells herself her husband doesn't care. She convinces herself that her needs are legitimate. She reframes her actions as harmless. And all the while, she is walking further from truth and closer to self-deception. 3. The hidden enemy. Pornography. If point 2 reveals the way self-justification erodes marriages, point 3 uncovers the silent poison that modern life has normalized. Pornography. The normalization of a hidden addiction. For centuries, human temptation was external. You had to go out into the world to seek it. But in the modern era, temptation lives in your pocket, glowing at you from a screen. Pornography is not just an industry, it is a billion-dollar machinery designed to hijack the brain's most powerful reward systems. And here's the chilling truth. While many people excuse it with phrases like, "It's harmless," "It's better than cheating," or "Everyone does it," porn rewires the brain in ways that mimic drug addiction. Neuroscience research shows that pornography floods the brain with dopamine, far more than real intimacy does. Over time, the brain becomes desensitized. What used to excite now feels bland. So the viewer chases more extreme content, darker content, longer sessions, until real intimacy feels empty. Stoicism and lust. The Stoics were not strangers to this struggle. Though they did not have modern pornography, they wrote extensively about lust. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Seneca described lust as a fire that consumes reason, leaving a man or woman unable to see clearly. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, constantly reminded himself that pleasure without virtue is hollow. To the Stoics, lust was not just about physical desire, it was about slavery of the soul. When you are ruled by desire, you are no longer free. Why pornography destroys marriages. A husband or wife addicted to porn begins living in a fantasy world. The partner at home no longer feels enough. Expectations become warped by endless novelty. Intimacy is replaced with isolation. For married women, the justification often sounds like this: "It's not cheating if it's just on a screen. At least I'm not with another man in real life. It helps me cope with my stress." But these rationalizations hide the deeper damage. Every click, every session is a withdrawal from the bank of intimacy that marriage is built upon. The partner begins to feel like they are competing not with another person, but with an entire fantasy world they can never measure up to. The slow death of desire. Psychologists call this the desire paradox. Porn users often report less attraction to their real partners over time. Why? Because the brain, conditioned by endless novelty, struggles to find excitement in the ordinary beauty of a spouse. The woman who turns to porn tells herself it is harmless, but over months and years, she finds herself less interested in her husband. She may blame him, blame stress, or blame aging. But in reality, her own choices have rewired her capacity for real intimacy. A Stoic solution. The Stoics would approach pornography as they approached every temptation, not with shame, but with discipline. They would ask, "Is this action in line with virtue? Does it make me stronger or weaker? Does it free me or enslave me?" Porn, by its very design, enslaves. It feeds desire while starving fulfillment. It promises closeness while delivering loneliness. It creates the illusion of abundance while leaving the soul impoverished.